everything has been bombing this year. There's
Really?
everything like Madam Web that just came out. DC's not doing good either. Like Aquaman made no money. Blue Beetle made no money. Like,
wow,
they're not breaking even. They're spending way too much on all those movies. So it's just like they're just hemorrhaging money. There's rumors that Disney was trying to sell off Marvel because they felt like they weren't going to recoup like expenses they were putting into
that's
it.
crazy.
Yeah.
Because, 2 or 3 years ago, it was like you couldn't avoid those movies. And that's all they were making because they were making so much fucking money at it. It's crazy.
Yeah, the tide's definitely changed. You can just feel it at like this year's Oscars where it's just like it's all. I was looking at my year-end list, which is like specific. You know, I know I'm not the average person, but I usually have some big tentpole movies on it. And it's just like the only two big movies on it were Barbie and Oppenheimer, which still have like a very indie vibe to them. I think technically Oppenheimer was like independently produced because it's Syncope, like that's owned by Nolan, and I don't think he did it with like WB because I know that he kind of burnt his bridge with them.
That was the first. It was like the first film. I never actually watched the movie, but the first thing I've seen in a long time that seemed very A24. That wasn't A24. I was like, oh, that style's catching on now.
Oh, for sure, it's definitely becoming. And A24 is going bigger. Like A24 is talking about doing bigger. Like they have a Civil War movie that's coming out, and like they're trying to do bigger actioner kind of stuff, which is cool with me. Like I like middle budget action movies. Like I'm a big like. Michael Bay apologist. Like I love when he's not doing Transformer stuff. Like I love Pain and Gain. I love Ambulance. I love The Rock. I love Armageddon. Like I think he's really good at doing mid-budget, character-driven, like little like stupid, shallow action movies.
Yeah,
you know. And it's like I miss those. Now everything has to be like 3.5 hours long, and it has to like connect with like 8 other movies that it's setting up for later.
That are like just the incredibly drawn out storylines are like killing me.
Well, I feel like it's not you're not gaining anything from that except for cohesion. You know what I mean? Like cool, you're not changing actors that are playing this role movie to movie. So you're not getting the sloppiness of like 80s sequels when you have like 5 or 6 movies, like a Friday the 13th or something like that. But at the same time, like there's no creativity in it because like everything has like a legal pad treatment for like what's supposed to happen in the movie 5 years before the screenplay even exists.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and for the average fan, I'm sure it's great. But for somebody like myself, who's like, I enjoy watching those movies because they're fun. They're fun movies, but like I don't get into like the details of it. Like I don't know what happened, nor do I really care that much. I just know that for me, there's like the childhood nostalgia of it, and they're just fun, campy films. Like it's a good like escape from, the everyday world.
Yeah,
and I like it, but sometimes they just get so drawn out in details that don't fucking matter to me.
And there's so much stuff that's just like only has to do with whatever's coming next. Like that to me is a big problem. But I think one of the big like drawbacks and things that they're going to have to deal with, and they need to think about it, is like I don't know how people are going to digest that stuff in the future. Like I could keep track of the 10 Friday the 13th movies when I was a kid because they're like numbered. But like I don't know that they're going to know that like, okay, now I need to watch Thor 2 before I watch Iron Man 3 because there's some sort of scene that sets up something with this character. Like they don't have this durability to just like pick them out and discover them as like kids the way that other movie series do. You know, like there's no order to any of it because it's all just like name, subtitle.
Right.
And so you have 50 movies and it's just like, how are you going to find your way around this giant mess? And then you have to watch like TV series that aren't available anymore to get other parts of the stories. And so it's just like, there's nothing durable to me about that because it's too much. It's like when you try to get into a band that has like 70 albums. Like it's like why I've never gotten to the Melvins because it's just like it's too daunting and there's too many albums to like go into. So I'm like, I guess I'll just listen to like one of them. And like
they're not all great.
Yeah, exactly. And so you pick the wrong one, then you have a bad first impression. And then you tell someone, they're like, oh no, that's a really, really weird album. That's not a good one. And it's like, oh, okay, I don't know.
Right. I'm new to this. Yeah. I wonder if, like, I don't know. It does have like a lot of like things that are centered around like life and death. And I mean, I guess most childhood films aren't really like that now that I think of it. Like, but I wonder if that's like have like an impact on a younger generation of like having to be like forced into contemplating your mortality, especially with like superheroes and stuff like that.
I mean, I think that's the thing is like I think it's representative of our times, but I also think it's like not necessarily a good thing from a storytelling standpoint. Like I think you're always dealing with mortality in all stories anyway, but I think when you look at like our childhoods, it's like never-ending story where you're seeing like a horse drowned, and it's like horrifying, and it's this very intimate small scene between these two characters, and like. But now it's like every conflict in all these major movies is like everyone's gonna die, and so I think that that's like a natural outgrowth of like living in the possible end times that we're living through, where it's just like we might be in the final chapter of like humanity, but at the same time, like it's really hard to identify. It's that Stalin quote of like one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic, where like your brain
That's a great quote.
Yeah, and it's true about how people process that kind of stuff. It's just like when you can identify like a single person or a couple people and put a narrative behind it, and you can see their faces, you can understand what their personal story was, it makes sense. But your brain can't understand that like Thanos killed half the people on the planet. Like those stakes are intangible on a level that like humans can't really emotionally engage with it. So there's no way to make it deeper.
Atreyu was an asshole to that horse. He took him through the swamp of despair or something like that. And then he just like, get up, asshole. Like, of course he's mad. You're like,
yeah,
he's sad. Mm-hmm. You should maybe try and say something encouraging to the horse.
Well, he didn't know what he did, you know?
Right. He just talks shit into the horse. It's like, yeah, you're right. And just gets swallowed up by mud.
Mm-hmm. It's such a horrifying scene.
I know.
There's so many scenes like that and Watership Down and stuff like that just like traumatize children.
Which is hilarious that like that you're right. Like a lot of that stuff, or even in our childhood, like we're never ending story, it was like everyone's going to die. Mm-hmm. And if you follow Revelations, or like if you have ever read Revelations in the Bible, it's starting to look pretty parallel to some of the shit that they say in there, and you're like, fuck, like, yeah, I would never in a million years believe in like a god or like,
yeah.
I mean, some of that shit's just like, it's been going on for hundreds of thousands of years. So it's like, of course they're going to be right about that. Like,
yeah. I mean, I think that, they've been through pestilence and death and like famine, you know what I mean? Like, so like they'd seen like societies crumble at that point. And so, yeah, you just have to think of that on a larger scale, basically. Right. It's like, okay, we're all going to starve to death. Everything's going to get sick. Like there's going to be flooding. All of our homes are going to get washed away, and then we're just going to be fucked. So it makes sense from that standpoint.
Yeah. I wonder if like, what kind of trauma it's causing. I doubt probably any, because kids don't really give a shit that much. They're just like, oh, cool, things exploded. And
yeah, I mean, I don't think that they're probably getting trauma from those kind of movies, because I think that all those movies are pretty sanitized. Like they're dealing with heavy concepts, but there's not really stakes. You know what I mean? Like you had to sign the actors on for like 7 movies. But I think the trauma is just like kids like living today. I mean, like
sure,
growing up during the pandemic.
Yeah, that's why that, and like you're just as likely to get shot in school, or if not more likely to get shot in school than in a war zone.
Yeah. Did you see that there's this like, it's such a great news story, but it's such a depressing news story about this girl who, for her science fair, she tested to see how many books you would have to hold to stop a 9mm bullet if you held books to your chest to help prevent kids dying in school shootings. And it's like this 12-year-old that did this.
God. Yeah, that's crazy. Like that was a thing that had crossed her mind, to be like, yeah, we should probably figure this out. So this way it may actually help save lives. Yeah. Wow, that's nuts.
Yeah. So it's 2.5 thick books. Like that's what it is. So you have to have like 3 inches of paper basically to stop it.
That's crazy. And like, it's funny too, because like the boomer generation, and they're like, oh, they had it so easy. It's like, no, you guys got shot at in Vietnam. These kids are getting shot at on American soil in classrooms. Mm-hmm. Either way, like murder's murder and death is death, but like either way, you're both getting shot at.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess not in Vietnam because you can get drafted. You could have been drafted into it. But I mean, there is some, at least now in modern war, there's like some consent to be in that situation. Like you're signing up for it. And so it's sort of like a known quantity. But yeah, you should just be able to go to fucking school and like learn about algebra and not worry about like duck and covering.
Yeah, you should just worry about the economy collapsing, like our generation had to worry about.
Yeah. Never owning a home.
Yeah. You kind of like, I think you and I are very similar in the fact, like, do you like, were you, I guess, confronted or like at a young age with your mortality? Because I feel like you and I have a very similar like work ethic, and what drives my work ethic 95% of the time is the fact that I know I'm going to die someday. Sure. So I'm trying to document or at least like immortalize some sort of aspect of my life in any way I can. But like, do you like what was like the significant moment that like really happened that you were like, oh, like we're all gonna die, or like my life or my time here is limited?
Yeah, I mean, I was basically a caregiver for my grandparents when I was a kid. So like around 8, my grandma had lung surgery, so she had to start being on. She got like half a lung removed, and she had emphysema and asthma. So she had to be on 24-hour oxygen tube. And so like I was tasked with taking care of her. And my grandpa got diagnosed with Parkinson's when I was around that same time. So his like brain just like slowly went. So yeah, I mean, like it was like right there all the time. Like if the power went out, like the oxygen condenser would shut off, you know? And so we had like a liquid oxygen tank outside in the driveway. So at like 3 a.m. I'd have to like frantically go out with like this oxygen tank, fill it up and like get it back in the house so she wouldn't die, you know? So it was like that from like 8 to 16.
Wow. Then that's a pretty like a formative years too of your life, and being like, okay, well, you know, this essentially could if it could happen to my loved ones, it could happen to anyone.
Oh, for sure.
Like, did you have any other like family members that really struggled, like, with, I guess, medical issues in a sense? But
yeah, I mean, I come from like a big Catholic family, but like I grew up in Central Florida, and most of my family was up here in like in and around Ohio and Indiana, and so like I didn't see them a ton. But yeah, they've like there's been other health issues, but it's not anything that like I had to directly deal with.
You grew up in you grew up in Central Florida?
Yeah, I grew up in Polk County, which is like
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's
I had
like
no idea.
30 minutes in from Tampa, and then like 45 minutes south of like Disney in Orlando.
So what brought you to Cleveland?
But my grandma was dying, and so she was just like, I have a couple years left in me. Like, I'd like to go up and see like all of my kids and all this stuff, and kind of like have some level of like closure, you know. And my mom didn't want to be in Florida anyway, and so it's just one of those things where it made sense for them to like sell both of their trailers and then like move up here, so that we could, like, kind of like buy a house and, you know, like be somewhere. And so they moved to Lodi, like the former KKK capital of the North. It's just a terrible city. So I got out of that high school as soon as I could.
It's funny too, because I always assume that, like, in my head, the most racist place in America is Strongsville.
Oh, totally.
Because of all the stuff that you saw, like, and it's
officially endorsed like Republican candidates like as a city.
Right. That, and like all that stuff you saw like on TV about like people calling Obama like a Muslim and like I won't vote for him because he's black, or like shit like that, or like he's not from here. There's, you know, that wasn't even like a worldwide. It wasn't like a even like anywhere else in the country, that wasn't like a very firm belief other than Strongsville. Like it originated out of Strongsville, and it's crazy. Like, and literally all the people that they're interviewing, like they're all from Strongsville, and like it's like every time I always and then I get reminded about Lodi.
Yeah. I mean, the North in general, I think, has a problem. We're kind of like Austria after World War II, where like Germany had to do a lot of like, fuck, I'm sorry, like we made a huge mistake, where like Austria was like very involved with that and did really similar shit, and they kind of were like, look at them, don't worry about us, and so they never really had to like reckon with it the way that Germany had to. And I think that that's kind of the same way as the North, where it's just like once the civil rights movement got going and integration happened, there were strong like integration laws for the South because they're like, this is the problem place. Like we have to fix this place. But then you look at places like Cleveland, where it's like the most segregated city in America because everything's redlined, and the way it's built is you have a river separating the two races down the center.
Right.
And so like the North just went unchecked because they were smelling their own farts, and we're just like, oh yeah, no, we don't have the problem. That's a you thing. And it's just like, no, this is definitely like a race thing. This is like a white people thing.
Sure. It's like, we fought for the North. It's like, well, that's more of like geologically, you were in the right place.
Yeah, exactly.
But like morally, you're probably still just as racist as the rest of the country.
For sure, yeah. If not more, because you go unchecked again, like where I think like people in the South, and again, it's like if you look at like population density, like Georgia's more diverse and ethnic than Ohio is, So like, yeah, they might have a racist past, but like large swaths of Georgia are full of like cool integrated people that are very forward thinking.
Yeah. In Atlanta, I always rave about how much I love Atlanta because just because if it's like an ethnically diverse area doesn't mean it's the bad area. Mm-hmm. And you don't see that mostly in the North. Yeah. Where like, we're in Atlanta, that's just a nice, cool place to hang out in. Mm-hmm. Like, and it's refreshing to see that America can exist at least somewhere, which could be used as an example for other places. Mm-hmm. I mean, a large reason why my wife and I moved where we moved, I said, I am willing to live anywhere you want to live. Mm-hmm. Whatever city you want to live in, I'm fine with, as long as I'm not providing like the minority. You know what I mean? Because I'm like half Arab, I'm half Native American. I'm horrified by most white people. Yeah. So and I noticed our old neighborhood becoming more and more white. Mm-hmm. And I know how I look. I look white, and I'm perceived as white. And
I mean, I think you're passing, but I think like you also.
Oh, I'm very passing.
You're also not so passing that people couldn't just make assumptions.
When they find out, I think it like clicks in their head because I have a joke about it, and I literally get to watch people on a nightly basis like have it click for them. They're like, oh yeah,
oh fuck,
oh okay. Look, I used to see a lot of that, so it's fun. That's fun to watch, but like. But I'll notice things like that where like, oh, this neighborhood's getting incredibly white, and that worries me. Like, I was like, we gotta go.
Our city has problems, and tons of other cities have problems. But sure. I think if you're gonna try to do some sort of a broad catch-all with it, it's like population centers are where you get like people that understand how to live with other fucking people because they're forced to. Like, you're just forced to like live in this apartment building that has this big Indian family, that has this like whatever family, and so like you just have to share space, and so you just kind of become open to that culture because it becomes humanized to you. Sure. Like, and so people try to shit talk whole areas, and I always try to like tell people to shut the fuck up about it because it's like I have tons of friends in Texas at this point, and it's like places like Dallas and Austin are rad if you know the right people in those towns, and and so it just matters. Like we did a film screening when we were just premiering my last doc, and we went to Minneapolis for it, and I was just like, I don't know what the fuck to think about Minnesota, and so like we got there, and I was just like, oh, this is like one of the most like woke cities like I've ever been to. Like, everything's a fucking co-op. It's rad. That city's punk as fuck. Like, I had never seen so many like out and proud like trans people just like openly working in like customer service. Like, everyone in our hotel was trans. Like, at the record store, at the bookstore that I went to, and I'm just like, this is awesome that it's so inclusive as a city where people feel that safe, and like it seems like they're building a really nice economy around that. And it's just like you wouldn't think that because it's just like like you would probably associate it with something like North Dakota or Montana or whatever, because it's up there.
Right. Well, and I do, because like my dad's from North Dakota. When we fly out to go to the reservation, we fly into Minnesota and then we'll drive to the reservation. It's just like, it's much cheaper and it's quicker that way. So it just makes sense. But Minnesota is definitely one of those places where the reputation is like very true about themselves, and like the people there are incredibly friendly, and like they almost like it's every time I'm there, it's a little bit jarring for me because I'm not necessarily used to that kind of like trying to go above and beyond to try and just help you out for just because they're a good person.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, what are they like? I'm like, in my head, I'm like, what are they after?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was in a trip to Toronto for like 5 days, and like by the 5th day, I was like, I can hold my own fucking door. Like, stop holding the door for me. I was getting so mad at how friendly everybody was. Where it's just like I couldn't go into a single business where someone wasn't just like, oh hey, and then open the door for me.
Right. Yeah, Toronto's another one of those places where like the people there, I don't know. Toronto can be kind of, there's some assholes in Toronto, but I don't say they're necessarily assholes. They're like New Yorkers where it's like they're not assholes, they're just fucking busy.
Yeah, they're just direct, and I don't mind that. Like
right.
I've never felt like directness is like being an asshole.
No,
you know,
it's
like,
so refreshing.
I would prefer that to like taking 20 minutes to get to the point of the story in this passive aggressive preamble kind of way. It's just like, oh well, if you have the time, maybe if you could fit it in, and just say what the fuck you want, just tell me what you need from me, and then I can do it.
And I'm homeschooled, so I'm like an idiot when it comes to most social situations. So you have to be very blunt with me, like otherwise I'm not gonna get it.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go off thinking one thing, and it is, and in reality, it's another because you didn't just be blunt about it. Like,
yeah,
this is how it is.
Like the winking glance of like suggestions.
I'm not a mind reader. And if anything, I'm like so bad with social cues because there's just little micro moments in my life that I've noticed where I'm like, oh, I didn't see that. There's like, but the things like my neighborhood's turning very white. I'll see that clear as day. So, like,
oh god, I have like hyper awareness where I can't not hear like conversations at other tables in restaurants. It's like awful.
Oh, I love to people watch because you can learn so much from it.
You know, I like it, but then there's like days where I'm just like, I just want to be able to like hear this one conversation that's happening in front of me.
Oh yeah,
as opposed to, like hearing all of this around me.
Sure, yeah, I can definitely get distracted easily on like something that has zero to do with my involvement whatsoever. But it is kind of a nice little break from like, oh, like this person's been yapping on about the same thing for the last 15, 20 minutes. So I wonder what's going on table 4 over there.
Yeah.
It's just nice to kind of zone out of once in a while.
It was such a weird, fun moment. Like the first time that I was in New York and I was on the subway and like everyone else was like chattering in like different languages. And I was just like, this is wonderful. I don't have to hear any of these fucking people's conversations. And it just was another one of those moments of like, why the fuck does anyone care what language anyone speaks as long as like it's like not gumming up works with something that you're directly dealing with.
Sure, that's a great point.
Learn American when you come here or fucking whatever.
Right. Learn a language that's not from here.
That we don't pronounce the same way we pronounce from its country of origin.
Right. It's so
Took
funny.
all the U's out of those words.
Yeah. What a fucking... That's why I'm really hoping that... I hope Donald Trump goes to jail, and I hope that he becomes president all at the same time, because finally America will have the president they deserve.
Finally.
Finally.
Just a sitting president in jail.
Yeah. The whole country is built on a crime. So it's only fitting that the country, its own demise is based on a criminal.
Well, and this whole thing to me is a joke about like whether or not like presidents should be prosecuted. Like very clearly everyone of the last century should be in jail except for Jimmy Carter. He's like the only person that didn't commit a fucking war crime. And on top of that, like,
well, he didn't get a second term.
The one sick thing I know, because America's the dumbest place on earth. But like the sixth thing America ever did was like tell the king to go fuck himself. Like it's our one cool fucking L that we can brag about. And like now we're going like, well, but shouldn't the president be like a king god that's like unimpeachable under any circumstance, just so we feel good about ourselves?
Right.
And it's just like, no, man, you fucking take that dude out to the goddamn gallows, dude.
Right.
We literally fought a war and created a country so we could do that.
That's why, like, when people talk about January 6th, like, I have zero issue with what those people did. I don't have one problem with what they did. It's what they stood for, which appalled me to no end.
Exactly.
If anything, I was jealous of what they did. I want to storm the fucking Capitol.
Is they did the dog catches car kind of a thing, where it's like you're like, okay, we broke through the windows, and then like someone needs to murder people, and then they all kind of just stared around because it now like crossed the line of like LARPing.
Yeah.
And, like now they're like, oh shit, this isn't me sitting in my fucking truck with my Oakleys talking about revolution. Like I actually had to do the thing.
Yeah.
And they just like bitched out of it.
They really did. Especially that guy with the big like horns on, or he just kind of like walked around chanting shit.
Well, yeah, and this is the crazy thing that's happening with all these like right-wing idiots is like they're all becoming super like lib coded, and like that dude when he was in prison like awaiting his sentencing was just like bitching that like they didn't have vegan options in jail and all this kind of stuff. It's like you see all these crazy people on TikTok that are like reacting to the State of the Union the other day, and they're talking about how they felt their chakras like emptying and stuff like that. And it's just like somehow like crystal mommies have like gotten involved with like anti-vax moms, have gotten involved with like weird like Illuminati QAnon moms, and they're all together.
Yeah, the pandemic really mixed things up quite a bit. It stirred the pot.
Yeah.
And like a lot of people, I think it stirred the pot to the point where like, we don't even really know what we want, but we know what we're being given. We don't want that. And that's all we know.
Well, yeah, because we're like, I always talk about it like when I'm in conversations like this with friends, like we're a very non-ideological country. Like we have no theory. Like America doesn't fucking know Marx. They don't know anyone. They don't know like, they're like, you can make conservative arguments all the fuck you want, like, because there are like schemes that people put out like in philosophy books about like different conservative utilitarianism and like that kind of shit. But like ultimately, no one really knows like anything about where they stand. It's like how you see conservatives that are like, keep your hands off of my social security, your social hands off my social security. And it's just like, motherfucker, that's socialism. Like, it's fine if you don't like it, but like choose a lane. Like you need to understand this shit. And like, I think that's why people like Alex Jones resonates so much with people, is like he identifies the symptoms of like a broken system very correctly. Like when he goes like, everything's fixed against you, you're never going to have any money, and like, oh, they want you to just like be subservient. And it's like, yes, all this is right. And then like, yeah, it's the fucking Jews that are like putting microchips in your blood, you know?
Yeah, I'm trying to work, man.
Yeah. And it's just like, oh, you identified the right thing and then just completely went off the fucking board with like why that symptom exists, you know?
By the way, side note for the Jews themselves, he's being satirical. So no hate mail. And I'm trying to work here. I
know someone's just going to clip that clip.
I'm like, oh man, he's going to make fun of my bosses. Yeah, it's fun watching people be right for the wrong reasons, and that's the funniest part about like far right Republicans is like some of the things they are right about, but for the wrong reasons. Most of Trump's presidency was like that, in my opinion. Like he was right about certain things, but for the complete wrong reason. Like,
yeah, I mean, he's a good salesman, so I could identify what would resonate with people, you know?
Sure.
But it's like when you look at like Appalachian people, they're like mad that like the mine is failing and like they're forgotten by the coastal elites. It's like, you're not forgotten by the coastal elites. Like America doesn't do infrastructure spending, like, and we don't provide you with classes that can teach you a new trade, like so that you could possibly move away. But at the same time, it's like you're connecting your identity solely to like a location, and there is like this stagnancy that's keeping people from moving past those things. Like, I just think that like, it's a good thing that those fucking coal mining jobs will be phased out eventually. We need to provide those people with opportunities so they can segue into some other career, you know, whatever that be. But like, you shouldn't want to do that forever, even if it is a part of your identity and you want to be proud about your labor and all that kind of stuff. But like, you can't do that same shit forever. It's like, it's like the people that like had like ran horse-drawn carriages when cars first got invented, where it's just like, sorry, man, like you have to do something else. Like you just can't stay the same way forever.
Yeah, and they haven't forgotten about them. Like the coastal elites haven't forgotten about them at all. They very much so want to blow up the tops of your mountains for coal. They're well aware of that.
For sure. Yeah. No, I mean, Congress is just bought and sold. Like it's just
100%.
They've been given a good enough deal to give a shit about that area.
Well, I've been ranting and raving lately about how like everyone just needs to stop paying their fucking taxes. Like stop paying your federal taxes. For the love of God, because they don't care about your vote. They don't care about your voice. They don't care about your guns. The only thing they fucking care about is your money. That's why every politician in the world, the first thing that they say, no matter what, left or right, the first thing they go after is jobs. They want to create jobs. Want to know why they want to create jobs? Because that's more income for them. It's more your federal income tax that they can collect. And the thing that pisses me off most about like politicians where they'll take that money, they'll put it in stocks, which they get to manipulate. So the rest of us, like, they get to live a socialist life where the rest of us has to, like, are left to battle capitalism.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. There's always a bailout for them because they're essential, you know?
Right.
Like fucking Boeing is just like falling out of the sky, but then they function completely on subsidy. Like the amount of times that they've been bailed out, they should just be nationally owned by us. Like we should just own the fucking airlines, and it should just be a net fucking like just a net zero situation where you keep the prices as low as possible so that it can function properly and at a good level. And like, we just all own it together as a country.
Such a and that another thing I've been saying lately is that like the reason why I want to pull my money out of my income tax is because I'm getting a very poor result on my investment in this country. And like I'm like being Arab and Native American, both sides of my family at different types and different times in history were considered a terrorist group. And like, so I'm a conscientious objector to like have my tax money not be put into the things I am paying you to put those money things, like the money into. Like, I don't want it to go to wars. I want it to go to schools and roads and like all the, you know, other programs that actually help society. Like, I mean, I'm no different than anyone else in the fact that like, I'm sure most people would want to see their income taxes go towards housing homeless people. And helping people, helping homeless people with their mental health issues.
I mean, there's no ROI on that. I mean, like, that's why, like, no one wants to fucking do it. You know what I mean? It's just like, there are more houses that are vacant in LA for lots of different reasons. The one, false scarcity, so it just jacks up the value of everything else because you go, there's no apartments available. And it's just like, it's just people fucking squatting on houses. But there's more vacant houses in LA than there are homeless people all through the entire county. And so like you could, not that you're just gonna shove them into every random house or whatever, but it's just like a clear statistical thing where it's just like there's ways to fucking do this. Like we have the means to fix this problem. Like there's other countries that don't fucking have this problem.
But then they have the scary label that everyone's horrified by, whether it be like socialist or communist or whatever. It just because it doesn't say like USA or capitalism on it, all of a sudden it becomes like the enemy. But because our whole lives have been painted that way. Like communism has been painted as the devil.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's less and less of an issue the more people die off that are like brain broken from Cold War propaganda. Like when you talk to like young people, like they don't fucking, like, none of that shit resonates with them. Like, oh, you called me a capitalist. I mean, sorry, a communist, like whatever, you know? Like, and not to say that all of them have read like the Communist Manifesto or Capital or whatever, but like they're not fucking afraid of it because it just like wasn't shoved down their throats. And they also understand inherently that the system is broken and like the young generation is like the most educated generation in history, which is part of why like they're quiet quitting and they're fucking not, because it's like, why? Like, who gives a fuck? Like, I don't have a future. Why would I give a shit about investing in this system to get what back? Like, to like my honorary fucking Water Wars badge? Like, what are you gonna fucking do? But yeah, so I mean, I think that like the communist label is looking less and less like, to me, like it has any kind of real traction outside of like saying woke or whatever, which means nothing at this point. And like, I'm not, you know, that's not to say that I think like Zoomers are going to like save the fucking world or anything like that. But I do think that we're going through a paradigm shift, especially looking at these most recent like primary elections where you're looking at all the non-committed votes and you're looking at like a real left that's like emerging in this country that does not have like a proper voice or a proper foothold. And like the Democratic Party has no interest in actually like meeting them halfway or even like a quarter of the way. And so like they're trying to do what you're supposed to do, which is like strong arm politicians to give you concessions. That's the fucking point of democracy. So the fact that they're trying to scare them and go like, we're not fucking committed. Like, it doesn't matter that Trump is like the worst fucking like wannabe fascist option. Like if there is no fundamental change that's going to occur under this, then who gives a shit? Like it's still going to be fixed against me either way. And so like you need to make Democrats fucking scared to get anything out of them. Like you have to try and pull those concessions from them.
100%. And I don't know. Again, I don't know if that necessarily works because I don't think that they give a shit what you have to say. They're just going to like, they just blame the other side for whatever happens. And then the other side will blame the other side for what happens. And it's just flinging mud left and right where like, and the sad part is the mud itself doesn't actually exist. That's the part that like really frustrates me, or like, I don't know. It's such a tough time. Like, I don't know if it's a tougher time than previous times to be alive, but it has definitely felt like helpless in a way. And then, like, you're right. Like, a lot of people are like quiet quitting and doing all these things, like, because I'm not anything and I'm not going to be anything. Yeah. So why give a shit?
Like, the idea of legacy to me, even at my age, feels so abstract. Like, I want to do stuff that is fulfilling to me within my life with like people I care about and respect. And I'm always working for that reason. But when it comes to like, I don't have the illusion in my mind that like, in 100 years, someone will be watching a movie I made or reading a book I read. It's just like, no, it's all going to get burned up in the fucking Great Fire of 2056. Right. You know? Like, I don't buy that. Like, and I don't think that's a good way to live your life anyway. Like, I actually think that that's the way that you make really bad art, really stale art, is thinking about legacy and trying to think about being like the great American whatever.
Sure.
And so I don't think it's like a good goal to have. Like, I do think that it's like that think locally, not globally thing of just like, just be a good fucking person. Try to change the things you can that are within your wheelhouse, because so much is fixed against you that if you actually focus on like how you spend your fucking money locally and don't just give everything to fucking corporations. Sure. And like try to build community with like your friends and like do something that helps people, even if it's little shit. Like, if everybody actually tried to put some real weight behind those sort of actions, like you would see vast improvement without worrying about big systematic change.
And that's, I think,
and it's all selfish. Like, it's all for this generation. Like, who gives a shit if you start a community center, if it's going to be used in 150 years, as long as like it's helping fucking kids out today.
Sure. You know? And I think Gen Z is very good at finding what those things are in a way that like older generations aren't. Like, we need like some sort of like system in place or like a group heading it off, where I think Gen Z is really good at like creating those opportunities for themselves and like in both social media and in real life situations, because, you know, they're just more savvy with the internet than we are. They just truly are.
I think, like, especially when you look at like our parents, like everything, it's not legit. It's not a real thing to care about until it's like on TV is like very much their thing. Sure. And there is still this sort of like false legitimacy that's still kind of in our age group, where like, I do think that like that does not matter. Like, the true democratization, I think, is reaching like teenagers, where they understand that it's just like, why the fuck am I going to go to a record label that's going to steal all my fucking money from this? Like, I'm going to make an album and then I'm going to book my own tour and then I'm going to fucking like put this shit out and just try to do it myself. And like, the bands you see taking off right now are the ones that are just like figuring out how to fucking do it and running it like a small business, as opposed to like being like, we have a demo tape, Capital, please put it out so that way we can get 1 cent per album. You know?
Right.
Like, it just makes no sense to go through systematic channels, because everything is so just maximized. Like, I mean, it's the same way with films. Like, I have no interest in like pitching anyone in Hollywood. Like, I'd rather make something for a very little amount of money that limits me greatly in making it, because at least I have creative control over it and I'm not wasting years of my life trying to pitch these people who are like bean counters and like have no taste and have never seen anything before.
Sure.
You know?
And then the only thing that they're good for is making more money to make another film at like a quarter of the cost it should be. And I don't know. I had a point. I totally lost it. Something you said, and I can't. I do this once an episode where I'm like, oh, I have something very poignant to say, and then I forget what the fuck it is.
I usually just like stop talking. I just go like this, and I just kind of like let the person spiral until they figure out what it is. Yeah, that's not good radio.
You've been carrying this very well for me. So, there was a point. Oh, I think it's going to be weird when it comes to a point, because I think there's still people today who aren't necessarily like creating content, but I think there's a generation coming very soon where quite literally everybody will be making some sort of content in general, or some sort of post. And that's going to be a really crazy time, because I don't know if necessarily we have like the technology or the infrastructure to handle that amount of information floating in that big of a bulk. I mean, who knows? I could be totally ignorant to that, but
to me, it's interesting and kind of exciting, just because like I think it's decentralizing culture to like a degree we haven't seen in like hundreds of years. where like there are no like arbiters of culture. Like there's whole pockets of culture. It's kind of sort of creating like a reverse regionality kind of a thing.
Sure.
Where like if you're not in these pockets, and it doesn't matter where you live, but if you're not in these pockets, you don't fucking get it. Where like regionality has kind of gone away. Where like there is no like Atlanta rap style as much anymore. There is no East Coast rap styling or whatever genre of music you want to do. Like dialectic kind of shit is kind of gone because people are just so in tune with everything. You have access to everything, and so you're like, oh, I'm going to cherry pick this idea from this area and this idea, and then I'm going to throw this like weird like kind of foreign idea in there because I listen to J rock or whatever, you know. And so like and that's exciting too because there's like a real homogeneousness to things. Like there's a real chaotic sort of experimentalism that's happening even in like pop music right now. And so that's cool. But like, yeah, I think that what we're going to see is like our culture becomes so fractured that there is like no mainstream anything. It's all just going to be like clumps of people that are into specific things and nothing is super large. And like, that's scary on an artistic level. That is super exciting to me because now there's obscurity again.
Sure.
You know, but then, you know, if you expand that to the political level, like, I mean, how do you sustain like a country as large as ours by having like no centralized narrative that you can glom onto to create a sort of collective identity, you know?
Yeah. And if there is, no one likes it.
Yeah.
It's not good enough for everyone to get behind it. So it's usually like on the weaker end of things, but like, I don't know. It is kind of exciting to see how like it'd be decentralized, but like I wonder if like you're starting to see that a lot too in comedy, where like comedy's getting to a point where there's so much of it happening. Now it's getting genred. Which is crazy to see because before it was just like two camps. You had your club comedians, you have all comedy.
Yeah.
That was it. Those are the only two things. Now there's just like different branches of like, oh, he's an indie comedian who does like indie rooms only. And like, or like, you know.
I'm a pretentious asshole that likes that. Like I'm that guy that likes like multi-hyphenate genres where they like people be like, what band is that? And I'm just like, oh, it's this whatever band, but they'll be like, what is it like? And I'm like, it's like trap flavored grindcore that has like weird like industrial synth stuff in it, but then it also has like weird cumbia drums or something.
Right, yeah.
It's just like, oh, okay, what genre? It's like, I don't know, heavy, weird.
Yeah,
I don't know what the fuck to call it.
That's what it's been interesting to watch comedy get like enough people involved into it to now we need to like make these little subcategories of comedy. And like, are you into those? Or like there may be like a multitude of things that you like and you don't like the other thing. And like, it's kind of funny because before it was just like, you liked either old comedy or you liked club comedy or you liked, the arena guys. There was only really three things that were going on. And even, I don't know, the arena comedy or like, well, I guess I was thinking of George Carlin when I was a little bit when I was like, oh, he might be considered an arena comic, but he only really did one album in an arena and the rest were all done in theaters. So I don't know if he's necessarily like. Yeah.
And so much of that is like, not all post to Seth, but it's like with Richard Pryor and stuff like we're just not going to have, there's no Beatles ever again. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. Like, again, kind of with the legacy stuff, where it's just like, I don't know what the point would be to aspire to be something like that or to hope that would be a dream one day. Like, I don't think that it will ever be that big ever again.
Why would you want that?
I don't know why you would want it, because I think that, like, when you're looking at, like, the final kind of trails of that occurring, where it's like Taylor Swift and Kanye West, it's like they're destined to fall off. Like, they're always going to, like, betray whatever that is. I think it's just like sort of like natural mana chemistry sort of thing where it's just like you've reached the top, there's only somewhere to go and it's down. Like, so like I don't know why you'd want to be up there. Fame is horrifying to me. Like, which again is why exciting to me, why it's like, oh, I can just do a bunch of cool shit that I like and like 3,000, 4,000 people might know me at some point, you know, or whatever. And like, maybe I can like make everything break even or even like earn a living at it one day. Like, that's cool. That's the goal. But I don't know why you'd want every person on the fucking face of the earth to like have an opinion on you. Like that's just like, I would like, I don't know how that doesn't like destroy your brain.
Yeah, I don't have the fortitude for it. I've been saying this a lot lately where like I don't want to be a Bert Kreischer. I don't want to be Tom Segura.
No.
I wouldn't even want to be, and I love the guy. He's a great dude. Like he's always been very kind and friendly to me. Mark Norman, I wouldn't want to be Mark Norman because I couldn't handle that kind of fame.
Yeah. Even if it's all good, then it's like, I just feel like your brain as a person is just like, well, no, fuck you. Like, how dare you like invest this much emotionally into me?
Right.
You know,
and I don't know how they handle that type of success because I really don't envy it. I'd much rather be like the guy who opens up for Mark Normand than be Mark Normand. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And as I've worked on more and more projects, I feel like those are always like the coolest guys to meet are like the guys that are like, not the main guy, you know? It's just like, no, you don't want to know like the main singer of your favorite big band. Like he's going to be he wouldn't hold the door for you. He's an asshole probably. But like you want to know his like fucking tour manager and like head roadie and shit like that or whatever. Like those are the guys that know everyone and everything. They have a bunch of fucking connections. They have all the fucking stories. They don't have like any worry of people knowing about them, you know? It's like being a character actor as opposed to like a leading man.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, I just
like Steve Buscemi has to have like the nicest fucking life because he's like you know, recognizable, but probably not to the point that he's like being stopped every 5 minutes, and he can kind of choose the movies that he wants to be in, and none of the movies are like banking on him. Like a movie's never gonna fail hard enough to ruin his career. He's always in a supporting role, you know,
unless it's Boardwalk Empire, which is a great, but also too he wasn't necessarily like he was the lead character in it. But you saw Martin Scorsese's name way bigger than his on that. Yeah,
definitely. It was definitely more on his shoulders as far as like who is like identified as the main idea maker or whatever.
Yeah, which is really funny. It was a really funny approach to that. I just started rewatching some of it recently, and I'm like, it's so well done, and it's like just the people who they got involved with it are just at the top of their game, and he's brilliant in it. But the fact that they like highlight Martin Scorsese so much.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that I don't quite remember it, but I think I remember reading about like how it was kind of rocky starting it, and I think they weren't sure if they were going to get the budget that they needed for it, and so I think they were trying to figure out ways to sell it to an audience because it kind of needed to like have rubber meet road really quickly.
Yeah.
It wasn't like one of those shows where it could have like 2 seasons to kind of figure itself out.
The two most expensive genres of making films is both period pieces and sci-fi. Because you have to like spend so much money on creating things that don't exist in today's world. Yeah. So
I mean, it's like when they make Gangs of New York, that's like the last set that scale we have like ever built. Like because everything has been moved to smaller studios, and you're building smaller sets. Like they built like a quarter square mile of a city. That was like functional.
Wow.
You could like because all the scenes are like shot in the same area. It's all supposed to be the 5 points.
Right.
So I just remember that being like this big deal that it's just like they built a small city for this fucking movie.
That's crazy. Yeah, maybe that and like Gangs of New York and like Lord of the Rings are probably like the big, and even Lord of the Rings, a lot of that was still CGI'd.
Yeah, but I mean, like the Hobbits are a CGI nightmare, but like those first ones, I mean, that seems like such a great situation where you're just making these movies constantly for like 6 years, and it's all the same team, and it's just like there's just like a whole chainmail team that's just working together every day, and like that's that crew, and it's like working a job for a half a decade, like that was like a family. Like when I heard stories about like those movies ending and people like weeping, like I totally got it. Where I'm like, this isn't some cheesy thing to like sell how close people were on Friends or whatever. It's like, no, this is like a family. Like they spend a significant amount of their lives like every single day together.
Yeah, and the director had been working on it for like decades.
It was like his dream project that he wanted to do forever.
He got to do it.
Yeah, which is crazy to me. I mean, like that again shows like how like risk averse studios are now. Like when you look at Peter Jackson's filmography up to that point, it's like Dead Alive and like Bad Taste and Meet the Feebles, like these insane New Zealand like splatter flicks that are just like so vulgar and disgusting, and they're like, yeah, let's give this guy a giant like fucking popcorn trilogy for middle America. It's crazy what like a swing that they made.
Yeah, and the fact that it was like only supposed to be like 2 films originally, and then like the last minute they got like I forget who they switched it to, whoever.
Part of that was like they kicked Harvey Weinstein out of it.
That's
like,
yeah.
They like bought him out because everyone was just like, let's get this guy the fuck out of here. Like everyone hated him. He was being a terror, and I think he was the guy pushing for it to be 2 movies. So like once they like rejiggered the whole thing, like once he was out of the picture.
Yeah, and then the guy said it was like, oh, isn't it 3 books? So shouldn't it be 3 films?
This is like the thing you have to deal with when you make movies, where people just like completely approach it wrong, you know?
Well, I can't imagine the egos too, based on like almost nothing.
Yeah.
Like, or some sort of bullshit metric that they've seemed convinced that that's what they should be following.
Well, and there's like weird grudge shit that jumps up. There's this whole big article about one of like the head dudes at DC hating blanking on his name, but the guy who directed Joker, and was basically just like, fuck this dude, I don't want this guy to make this movie. Like, instead of giving him like $500 million, like we would give like a normal DC movie, let's give him like 50 mil. But he's a really, like, I'm not in love with his movies, but he's a really smart, fascinating dude when it comes to the money aspect of his movies. And so he was just like, yeah, you make this movie for $50 million. It's a drama. Like, it's a Coen Brothers movie. It's like scale-wise. So, like, let's just fucking do that. Like, I can make this work. And then, like, he gave them $1 billion return on their $50 million investment. Like, the turnaround on the movie is insane. And that guy was still gunning after the fact to, like, not let him do the new one.
Wow.
But the really smart thing about that dude is that, like, he always takes back end payment. Like, he'll never take a director's fee, which is what drops like the price of the project, because he's not making a salary the way a director should when they're doing it. He just takes points on the back end. But he also directed the Hangover movies and Joker and like all these movies that have made like $1 billion worldwide. And so like the amount of money he's made just by betting on himself is nuts.
Well,
and he started out as like a wild documentarian. Like, he did the Gigi Allen documentary, and he did this one called Frat House that's all about like super fucking gross frat dudes, like kids kind of movie, you know?
Wow.
That took place in a frat house that was produced by, I think, HBO, and like all these fucking prep school dudes like sued him after the fact. It's like this wild fucking thing. Yeah.
Pretty sure I saw that. Yeah, I didn't know that was the same guy. That's crazy.
Yeah, but it kind of tracks, like, because it's just like, you know, he got his feet wet making 2 things on these like insane dudes that like couldn't function in society, essentially. And then you extend that to The Hangover, which is kind of the same thing.
Sure.
Whereas these guys that are just like feral, you know, in this place where they have permission to be feral, and then you take that to Joker, and like that's that extension too, where like that he kind of is been making the same movie thematically like forever.
That's crazy. Yeah, he's such an interesting guy, and like the fact that he gets such a small budget, but it almost lent it to the movie. That's what makes that movie so great, is that it's so gritty and raw, and it's so different than any of the other Batmans, or like, you know, or like that genre of film, and like it's so unique in and of itself, and that's what made it so special in the end of it. Like,
well, that was always what was weird to me about DC, like chasing Marvel's coattails, like where they were like, oh, we need to do big expanded universe and a big superhero team. Like, one, DC's post-war stuff, so it just like is cheesy now. Like, no one's gonna buy into a lot of like Aquaman is silly, it's ridiculous. Like, it doesn't. No one's ever gonna believe that as like a person they can really emotionally invest in outside of like entertainment. But like, DC also owns all of the Vertigo imprint books. So it's like you have all of this like rated R, true crimey, super fucking gritty, super mature, super smart writing that you could be developing in movies that you're making for like $5 million, $50 million, like in that kind of like mid-budget range. And they could just be making money hand over fist because of their imprint. Yeah. And they just like choose not to develop those projects. And it's crazy to me.
Well, I think too is that people at that level think it's going to be more than it is, so they're like going to charge them more to be in it. Or again, a director who's dumb who thinks, oh, this is going to be something popular, so they're going to charge them a lot up front, where that guy didn't charge them a lot up front, and then they gave them the budget to actually market the fucking film, which is, in my opinion, a really smart way of like, yes, you're betting on yourself, but you're also giving them the budget to like actually push this fucking film.
Yeah.
And
well, that's another thing that people don't talk about, is like the official budgets are not what movies are made for. Like, when they say that like Avengers cost like $800 million to make, that means it cost like $1.6 billion to make, because marketing budgets for those big tentpole movies tend to be the same as production budget. So like no one knows what those movies actually make, like when it's all told, because all that shit's kind of behind the walls as far as like what the final drop dead dollar amount is. I
can't imagine the amount of accounting that had to go in and like to be involved into trying to figuring that out. Mm-hmm. Insane. Because, you know, there's so many things that go into making a film, and that I think just people don't realize that like literally every little aspect of it was put there for a reason, and somebody, you know, and then like everything was put in the scene for a reason, and it was probably bought or paid for or rented something or other. Like, I think that sometimes people forget, like, I don't know. There's a situation recently that happened to me where somebody asked me to do a project, and when I started explaining them how involved their project was, they were making me out to seem like I was poo-pooing the idea. I wasn't. Yeah. I was just trying to explain to them like
the scale of it.
The scale of what they're asking me to do. And it's going to take a crew of people to do it, and I can't do it for free. Yeah. I get it's just too big of a project to do to just throw my time into. And yeah, they're like mad that I kind of like, they thought that I was trying to like shit talk their project, and I wasn't. Like I was just trying to like wrap my mind around what it would take to actually like pull it off. And like, and then I would ask them questions like, what are some of the like places you want to film these things at? And they had no response.
Oh man. Yeah.
They didn't even come to me with something that was written down.
God.
It was just an idea that they had in their heads. And I'm like, that's not a lot for me to go off. Yeah. Of. Like, I'm not in your head. I can't picture what's inside your mind.
Yeah. And this is like automatically giving you like basically 6 positions worth of work on this thing. Right. Like, okay, I'm locations manager. I'm the budgeteer. I'm going to be the person that has to like wrangle all the actors. Like, you know, it's just like.
And here's the idea. It was basically they wanted to do Big Brother, but with Cleveland comedians. And it was basically like, go.
Oh my God. Like a reality show type thing?
Yes.
Holy shit. That's so, yeah, that's, man. Okay. So, like, industry standard is like when you're making a narrative movie, you have to shoot 10 to 1, basically, for everything. So if your movie's 2 hours long, that means you have 200 hours of footage. But when you're shooting documentary stuff, that means you have to shoot 100 to 1. So, I mean, just the overhead on hard drive space, especially if you're shooting in 4K, is like astronomical for a project like that. If you're going to be talking about a season of television, like you have to build a server to have that on it.
100%. And that was what I was trying to explain to them. And of course, like there's lighting, there's microphone, boom operators, like.
You need even if you don't have a crew and you're just like installing it, that means you have to have a bunch of cameras that can run concurrently and dump footage automatically onto some kind of like DIT station.
Right. And hopefully that person's like skilled enough where they can just like edit it on the fly. And if, of course, you need to get equipment to do that, and which costs a ton of money. Yeah. So, yeah, they just think like, no, you set up a camera, and then the comedians do things. Yeah. And then you capture it. Yeah. I wish it were that simple, but it's not. Even in something as like, I guess, low budget as like a reality TV show, because that's what they heard. Yeah. That's what they heard. They heard about all these low budget reality TV shows that are making a bunch of money and getting sponsors.
Yeah, I mean, reality TV just came from union busting during the strike that happened at the time. And like, I think it was 2003 when that first started. Yeah, I mean, like that's all like cheap reality TV means, is that it's non-union shoots, right? Like without star power. Like so there you go. Those are the two things. You're not paying stars and you're not paying crew, and so like that's the reason why it's cheaper to make reality TV. You're right. You know, it's like I know people that have worked on like Hoarders episodes that were shot around here, and it's very like you're just hiring fucking contract people to be here for like 3-4 days for a set day rate, and like that's it. You know. And like I've heard stories about like people like, you know, a producer walking into like a trailer and just like walking back out a couple minutes later and being like, okay, I'm gonna give you $500 to not leave because it's like that bad in there. Wow. So like, yeah, it's it's all just like nickel and diming shit. But I mean, like you can definitely do that on your own if you have the resources and you pull it all together. But then again, like that's ultimately going to fall on someone to deal with it and put it together.
Right.
You know, so if people aren't equally invested, then like there's no way it's going to actually get done.
And I asked them what their budget was, and then they had no response to that. And I was like, well, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to be an asshole, and it ended up becoming like a literal, like, it almost became a shouting match between me and this guy.
Oh, man.
And he was like very offended by me asking a bunch of questions.
Just, why aren't you just going with it, bro?
Right.
Yeah, I've been in those situations before. It's fine.
And then he told me that he said, fuck it, I'll make it with interns. I'll make the whole thing with interns.
Yeah, yeah, that'll turn out great.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Like,
say that to that new Twisters film poster where they just like copied the S from the old poster and put it on the end of the word. They couldn't even make a new S. They couldn't rewrite the original
that's
title.
amazing.
And it's like, you could just pay, I know poster designers that like make like Criterion covers and like Arrow covers and shit. It's like, you can just pay them like $1,000. It's like not that much money for them to do like an entire marketing campaign of visuals for you, so that you can like sell your fucking product.
Sure.
And they'll just choose to be like, no, give it to the intern. They know Photoshop, right? Whatever.
Right. And I don't know. That's because there's a lack of an actual entertainment industry here in Cleveland. So it's not necessarily their own fault either. It's just regionally, we don't have an entertainment industry here. We just don't. There's small pockets of it, or there's like people who are doing entertainment, but I wouldn't say they're necessarily like a necessarily centralized like entertainment industry here. That's why they're like somebody like Hoarders or like even major films. They look at this place as a way to save money because then they can pull a bunch of 1099 employees. And
there's a tax incentive to come in because of the commission, which is a good thing. I mean, it is bringing jobs. I mean, I've worked on those movies. I have a ton of friends that have worked on those movies, and like it's not like they don't pay well too, but. There's no like centralized hub here. Like it's for people to drop in, do a thing, and then leave.
Because they know that income's also taxable, like a good tax write-off. 1099 employees, W-9 employees, you can write that shit off.
Employee tax.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's so much that goes into it. That's funny because remember how earlier I was saying how I was trying to get out of paying my income taxes. I was trying to get my job to make me either a 1099 employee or W-9, and then I would use my LLC for here as a consultant.
Say your like entire scheme.
Oh, I don't care. They already said no, so I couldn't even pull it off. But yeah, I have another scheme planned, but I won't say that one because that one might actually happen. But
just start burying the money under the house.
It's just crazy that you can really like what's legal to do.
Oh yeah, yeah. And we wonder why like no one pays anything once you hit a certain tax bracket. Like I mean, they like look down on W-2 earners. Like the dudes that make like passive income from investments are just you're a W-2 person.
Right.
It's just like, oh my God, these fucking pieces of shit.
And that's the thing. I'm not mad at it more. If anything, I'm jealous of them because they are pieces of shit, and most rich people are. And most rich people are assholes. And the reason why they're rich is because they fuck somebody else over or a bunch of people over.
And because there's shame. Like the one thing I'll give rich, and I fucking hate rich people, but the one thing that I'll give rich people as far as like consistency is that they have way more class awareness than poor people. Every fucking poor person is like a temporarily embarrassed millionaire, and they're all just like, oh, I'll be rich one day, so I don't want those to be regulated because I'm gonna hit it big with whatever dumb idea I have.
Right.
You know, one day I'm gonna be Kanye one day, so I don't want him to fucking pay taxes.
Right.
And it's like no, you won't. Like the odds of you escaping your level in the caste system is like very, very like no one's gonna be Jay-Z. You can look at him as an example all you want, but just because you sell weed like doesn't mean you're gonna become like a multi-platinum artist. Like, and so. But the smart thing about rich people is that like when they're offered an opportunity to save money, they're like, yes, give me the money. I want it. It's my money. Fuck you. And then poor people are like, no, I couldn't possibly take that $5 from you. I would feel so ashamed. I know I can't. And it's like, no, take the fucking money.
Right.
Like,
I don't get it. Take the fucking money.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they have the fucking time to go through like, because they don't actually work for a living. They use their money to make them more money.
Yeah.
And that's all. So all they have to do is like literally like put down $100,000 and wait for that $100,000 to come back with another 50 on top of it. And so they have the time to go look through like all the tax codes and everything else. And that's why they're good at it. I mean, it's a very fine line between like conniving and like ethic or like, or smart or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think as far as their choice making, like, yes, they fucking suck and they're terrible, but I also sort of can't blame them because they're doing it because they've been given an opportunity by loopholes and by people not fucking holding them accountable. It's like a pretty person having like pretty privilege and like getting away with everything in the room. That you be the biggest asshole, and it's just like if you're a fucking 10, then like, oh well, it's just like people will put up with that dude,
right?
Or whatever. But yeah, I mean, like, so it's just like, yeah, we need fucking income caps. You should like be heavily taxed if you're going to be passing your wealth generationally, like everything. Like there needs to actually be fucking systems in place that work. But like we have no interest in building those because it might be divisive.
Well, or they'll band together and get some sort of lobbyist involved so they don't have to actually do those things.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I just don't. When it comes to like policy, like. I understand the need for input from people, especially from specific regions and things like that. But at the same time, it's just like, you could just do studies on this. You don't need fucking people that run companies to tell you how it is. Like, you could just run fucking studies on it and then just go off of hard facts of how this shit actually functions.
Right.
It's like, but I mean, that's all that shit. It's the same thing as like the Electoral College, where it's just like, why the fuck does Montana have as much representation as anywhere else? Like... Like, there's no one fucking there. There's no one in Wyoming. I don't understand why these people have 2 senators.
Yeah, there's no need for them. Who are they representing? I mean, don't even start on that. This is fucking, the Electoral College is such a fucking joke. And it's just it's fucked up and it's deflating. That's why people of minority don't give a shit about voting because they know that their voice isn't really being heard.
Well, and that's the thing. And I've been screaming because this election's gonna be fucking hell. It's gonna be awful.
100%.
I usually am like down for a shit show, and I take pleasure in like just the sort of chaos of the moment. It can be entertaining because like ultimately I live in kind of a privileged position, and I like it's low stakes for me.
Sure.
At the end of the day, I'm not in one of these very much targeted communities. That said, like this one's gonna be a fucking nightmare, and like part of that is like people not getting the strategy about this kind of thing. Like Democrats for the last like 50 years have been focused on this like 1% of Republicans they think they can shave off that are like reasonable moderates. And it's like over here, it's like the meme where it's just like, and then right behind you is like 45% of the country that feels completely disenfranchised. And when you poll them, they're like, we want healthcare, we want transit, like we want all this shit that people are screaming for. And they're like, no. We just need to be as conservative as possible to get these fucking votes.
Yeah, it's what a fucked up. I can go on for days about it, and I have, and I will probably continue. But it's just funny to me that like people and then there's those people who are oblivious and they have money, but they just don't want to spend it, and they're oblivious to the fact that like in order to make or create certain things, it takes a budget to do it, and they're just like baffled that you would be like, oh, what? Like, I don't mind working for free, but like, I can't lose money doing it.
Yeah.
And also too, like my time, like I don't mind putting my time towards a project that I'm passionate about, but those are things I've chosen or I've come up with on my own.
Yeah. You've opted into it.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to spend all of my time for your passion project. Like, why should I have to?
Yeah.
You should be doing the thing you're asking me to do and figure that part out. Yeah. Because I already got my own shit that I'm, my own passion projects that I'm losing money on constantly and shamelessly. I'm not going to be the next Jay-Z. I'm not going to be the next Kanye. I'm not going to be the next Mark Normand. And nor do I want to be those people. I just want to be this guy who's relatively, respected amongst his peers, or as like as a person of who's like a good comedian and is respected as a good comedian, and like maybe works the cellar making like $25 a set. Like,
Yeah.
But that's all I want. That's my mountaintop.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that that's totally reasonable. And like, if you exceed it, then awesome. But like, yeah, I have basically the same approach with everything that I've been working on, where like, I just wanted to break even. I want shit to pay for itself, and I want to keep like not leveling up in the sense of like monetary success, but level up in the sense of like I'm building a good reputation for myself, and I can work with more people that I respect, and like go like, oh, this is a musician, or this is a writer, or this is a whatever that like I really admire, and now we're doing this project together.
And you've been doing a hell of a job of like promoting yourself, and like,
Thanks, man.
you've been and aligning yourself with projects that like are really brilliant ideas. Like the last documentary you did, don't I'm sorry, you're gonna have to correct me. Don't Fall in Love with Yourself.
Yep.
Oh yeah, I nailed it. And it was very well done.
Thanks, man.
And I love how much the fact that you seem you guys be taking this film to different cities and playing it for and different like music venues, which is a really brilliant idea to play that film in.
Yeah.
And you guys seem to be like packing most of those shows out.
Yeah. I mean, I'd rather a packed like small room than like an empty big room, So we tried to pick places that were like 100-ish people that we could fit into it, and then like other than LA, that was like a pretty huge theater that we packed.
That's awesome.
So that was real fun. But yeah, I mean, it came out at a weird time where it's like the tail end of COVID, and like movie distribution is just fucking weird right now. Like no one wants to pay for anything. There's a lot of weird gatekeeping because there's so many middlemen. Like you can't get shit on streamers unless you know like a sales agent that's not going to do you dirty. And even then it's like a ton of off top money that's gone. And then like it's all sort of elusive how it gets paid out. And so I was just like, fuck it. Like, I'm not going to sign it over to a company that's not going to care. Like, I'm going to commission poster artists that I respect to do this shit. I'm going to try to like do cool events for it. Like that'll at the very least break even. Like, again, like if we have to travel to St. Vitus in New York, like it's overhead. I have to fucking get an Airbnb for real cheap and like fly out or drive out. And like, we have to cover all of that shit. But ultimately, like, I played a fucking movie at St. Vitus. Like, this, like, what is the new, like, Max's Kansas City or CBGB's, basically?
Right. And, people pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for a college education. And we've paid hundreds of dollars. Like, we have also paid towards an education. But, like, I don't see that as being any really all that different than, gaining those experiences are going to like help you in the long run and are going to help you learn those experiences are going to help you learn how to do things better for the next project. And yeah, it's been really cool watching that like happen the way it's been going down. Like it's cool to see that there's like and when it comes to like smaller rooms, you're preaching the fucking choir. I love a small intimate room. I live for it.
Yeah.
Like I've been for the last like year and a half just been preaching about how every comedy show should be run in a wide and shallow room where like, most music venues is all like a long, narrow place where comedy, instead of it being at the end of the room, it's in the middle of the room off to the side. And this way everybody has like is connected to that performer.
Yeah.
And everybody, there's no bad seat in the house. So, like, and it just in Cleveland, in New York, that's
it's almost like a jazz supper club type thing.
Pretty much, and like, it's a common practice in New York, but like in Cleveland, it had not been happening at all, and everybody was doing shows in these like long, narrow places. And I just noticed that, like, well, somebody had mentioned to me that like they're doing it wrong, and then I noticed that. Yeah, they're getting diminishing value. Yeah. As further deeper and deeper they get in that room.
And more, it feels like you're watching like a video or something because you're that removed from the performer.
Right. And it's just like, it's weird to be.
Why I hate stadium shows. You know what I mean? Like if it's like, well, these people are 70 and they're going to die and I'd like to see them them before they go. Like if it's that kind of a situation, like I saw Elton John, one of the times he came, like that was worth going to see that. But yeah, no, I want to be in like a fucking sweaty room with like under 500 people.
Right.
And
it's fun. And you get to connect with people, and that's fun. And that's another reason why I love comedy so much is that like, I was a musician, you knew, how long have we known each other? Like,
God,
gotta get close to 15,
2010-ish.
Yeah.
Around there.
It's gotta be, it's 13. Been 13 years. Yeah. So like, we've known each other for a long time. So you knew me when I was a musician, and I don't miss being a musician at all. Like I've always said that I'm a better talker, or I'm better at running my mouth than playing a bass.
I think that's debatable, but
I wasn't a terrible bass player, but I don't think I was all that great.
I mean, proficiency aside, I mean, I think you were a great performer. I mean, I think you just have a sense of stage presence, and I think you know what you're doing, and I think you know how to get a rise out of people, which makes sense to me. Why, like when you transition to comedy, I was just like, oh, that makes fucking sense. Like I couldn't stop laughing anytime we'd be around each other.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, performing is definitely was something inherent, and I used like a lot of the like. Not necessarily because I'm older now, I don't have necessarily the oomph that I had when I was younger like that, but that element of like performance is definitely there. But I was definitely a better performer than I was even a bass player. Like even creatively, like I think that I was just surrounded by such great musicians in that band that it elevated me enough to look very good at what I do.
Sure.
That's it. That's all it was. I was surrounded by very talented people where I was like good at it, but I wasn't as good as they were. And I was definitely more of a performer than I was a real musician. And
I think that can be fine. I mean, look at Sid Vicious. You know what I mean? There's a reason we can still talk about him, you know?
Yeah, I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying, like, you know, there was a time where, like, you know, I was a musician and I liked doing it. And the band I was in did as well as we could have. And I'm proud of a lot of the work that we did. And so I don't have to look back at it as being like something that's embarrassing. So that's very nice.
No, I think those albums stand up, you know, it might have been a time and place situation.
Sure.
You know, I mean, I think that there's like other timelines where like those things just fucking connect and take. And also, like, who the fuck knows? Like, because of one of my upcoming book projects that I'm putting out that I can't really talk like a ton about, that whole sort of like East Coast hardcore thing that happened in the early 2000s, like Seisha and Orchid getting back together and H89 and like all those fucking bands, like none of those bands were playing to people when they were bands. You know what I mean? It's just like Zoomers just found Seisha and now suddenly they're like this incredibly important fucking hardcore band and like have a huge influence that like when they were a band, like they weren't fucking playing to anybody. And now they're getting offered like insane money to go do like festival shows and tours and shit. And like, so who the fuck knows? Not that you would necessarily take that up, but like, I don't necessarily think that like the gauge and the value of art should be on like how, you know, monetarily successful it is at that moment.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Like all of my pieces of all my favorite pieces of art are like things that were failures. You know, like I love Flannery O'Connor and I love I love fucking Van Gogh and shit. Like all of my favorite artists are just like people that made like 5 cents when they were alive and they died tragically young. And then like later on, people are like, "Oh, this is sick." Like no one was ready for it.
I agree. I don't think that necessarily. Like, I also don't think that you should gauge your success based on like the popularity of it.
You'll just like wish yourself into a grave being that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know when it happened, but I felt myself like disconnect from that. And I wish I knew the moment. Like I feel like that would be like a telling thing to know. But I just remember having this kind of thing where I'm just like, well, fuck it, whatever. I'm just gonna do whatever I want. I don't need to like look for approval or like look for like a career ladder, because also at the same time, like as you meet people that are like successful, it's just people that like lucked into it or they met the right person or like it accumulated over time. Like if you're waiting for opportunities to get presented to you and you're just kind of stagnant and not pulling the trigger on anything and not making sloppy shit for a while and you're worried about having like a Kubrickian perfect sort of like output where like there's no impeachable thing you put out, like you're never gonna make anything. Where like your career ends up happening because like you made like 3 shitty movies that you met all these different people with and you went to a bunch of festivals with it and you made a bunch of friends there, and then now suddenly like everything clicks like when you're 30, or 35 or whatever. Because
also too, you gave those people a time to get to know you and establish who you are as a person, and they can tell other people that how much they like. And then when you do things that are a little bit a little bit off kilter or even risque, they know the place in which it's coming from, so they don't have the problem with it as much as they would if it came from some rando. And like I think there's a point where like people enjoy watching the process and watching it grow. and we're watching it become better and better as it goes along.
Yeah.
And I think that it happens a lot in comedy where we talk shit on these comics who are posting these clips that aren't necessarily great right now. But I'll never say that a comedian is not funny. You almost rarely will hear that statement out of my mouth. Because I don't think that people aren't funny. I think they're just not funny yet, or you just don't connect to what they're doing, and it's not made for you. Like people talk shit on SNL, or when Trevor Noah had the Daily Show, like, oh, it sucked then, and it wasn't like, no, it just wasn't written for you anymore. Like SNL, there's parts about it that I really like, and I think there's very funny parts of it today. But there's a lot of it that I don't like. And I'm like, I didn't look at it being like, oh, it sucks now. It doesn't suck now. It's just not written for me anymore because I'm not in high school.
Yeah, well, and that's like, it's just like a sports team where like shit's going to filter in and out and suddenly you're going to like this person's voice or that person.
Right.
Like that's the thing that like I deal with all the time where with my book imprint, like I get submissions all the time and I have to like read through stuff really quickly or read through submissions or just like samples and that kind of thing. And it's always about voice and feeling. Like it's always about just like, is there potential here? Like I don't give a shit about like punctuation and spelling. And like, it's like, you can always fix that on the back end. Like if there's like a vibe to a thing that is just like, oh, like this feels like a real perspective. This doesn't feel like you just like went to some college and now like you wrote your first novel about like that time you did drugs at a college party.
Yeah.
And like, and broke up with your girlfriend or whatever. Like that's that kind of like stale stuff where I'm just like, you haven't found your voice yet. You're imitating things you've read in like a lesser way. Like once you figure out what your voice is and you know how to like lean into how you're perceived, like then I think that it's like gangbusters. But I think that's a lot of what like working comedy acts out is. It's a lot of music. That's a lot of writing where it's just like, again, it's like if you don't just do it and fuck up and like do shitty shit for a while, like you're never going to make anything good because you're never going to give yourself that time to like find that pocket. Where like everything that I've accepted and put out has been like, I knew in like the first 3 pages, like I didn't have, and I ended up reading it just because I wanted to make sure and just like be able to be like endorse the project. And like, there's nothing in there that I feel like conflicted about putting out. But like everything that I knew that I wanted to put out, I was just like, this is it. Like I know I already have like the email ready to go so that I'm like accepting it and want to do it, So yeah, you were recent, or you just put out a book, right? So what was the concept behind that book? So it's a book that I've been working on for technically it probably took about 2 or so years to write. It's a collection of interconnected short stories. So it's sort of like a novel in pieces, but I'm just calling it a short story collection just for ease. It's how my brain works. Is like I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna write a short story, and then I go write another one, and then it like connects to the other thing, and I'm like, okay, well, it has to happen in this kind of space. But the whole thing is based on a lot of true stuff that happened to me as a kid. I grew up in a trailer park in Central Florida, full of fucking crazy people and like broke people and desperate people, and so like there's just a lot of nuts shit that happened that when I tell people, they're like, no, you're lying. So I was just like, I want to kind of gather all these things together, and then I'm just going to put them in a big fictional framework. Like I just wrote down like hundreds of notes that are just like, well, this is the thing that can happen. This is the thing that, and then I just like built it into this sort of like big shared space between these like 20 characters.
I love that. It's like a nice little like snapshot of a time where that didn't really get snapshot or documented in any way. Like it's kind of like the theory behind this podcast is kind of like sharing of old experiences between myself and the guest, and trying to figure out like, okay, what were certain things in my past that I'd forgotten about?
Yeah.
And how do I make that into something, Because I think that there's a lot of like, you need to establish who you were before people get to know who you are now. And then they'll know where it comes from.
Yeah.
And they'll understand you a lot better in the end. So I think that's really cool that you like, I don't know. What do you think about our like upbringing, like made us like willing to like, or allowing ourselves to fail so many times and be okay with the failure and knowing that this failure is coming with something better on the horizon. I
think that like, I think that kind of just like happened. I don't know like what your like economic state was as a kid, but like I feel like that happens a lot in poor communities where it's like a don't get your hopes up thing. There's a lot of like beat downness to all of it. And so I think that like that community as a whole, like, I think my family understands, like, would be willing to understand, like, failure. Like, oh, you moved out to Hollywood and you tried to make it and you didn't, so you came back. Like, I think they could deal with that, but I don't know that they could, like, deal with success. You know what I mean? So it's not like necessarily a fear of success. It's the, like, I'm not even going to entertain the option because, like, it's not going to fucking happen. So I think that, like, that kind of is maybe where it comes from. It's just like, well, it's never going to work. It doesn't matter how good my idea is. I'm just going to fucking do it. Like, and then like, if, like, when there have been a couple releases I put out where, like, they very much overperformed, and I've just been like, okay, well, this is great. I'm glad that other people are into the shit that I'm into. So that's, you know, and it's not like insane life changing or anything, but it's just like I set my expectations at, like, rock bottom, and then I, like, when in those moments where I'm genuinely excited about, like, something doing much better than what I anticipated, like, it's such a good feeling.
I think once you get to a point when you figure out what your voice is or where your niche is or, like, where your lane is, I guess, in a sense, it continue doing those things over and over again, because it doesn't matter whether or not you are getting out there to your audience or whatever. Like, as long as you're creating it, it's there for them to consume, and that audience will find you. And odds are good that audience is going to be a lot more loyal than it been if somebody put some sort of, you know, insane marketing campaign behind it. Yeah. Like, it's the same reason why we don't give a fuck about, like, the Marvel DC universes crumbling around themselves, because we know there's just a ton of money behind it, and they promoted the shit out of it.
Fine.
Right. Everyone's fine. So it's like, I think that there's a lot more loyalty to something like what we're doing, because we know that, like, there's a chance we might not be fine.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, like, I think going over and above is like a thing that people can understand, even if they're not, like, smart or savvy about like art or whatever, you know, like, they're not those people that are going to go to, like, an art house indie theater every weekend or something. But, like, when they see people that are, like, friends of friends doing things, and they're, like, really trying to build a community around an idea or whatever, then, like, I think that, like, they're more apt to do it. Like, it feels more alive. Like, it used to be how, like, a lot of, not to rose-colored glasses, an era that I wasn't alive in, but it just feels like that's how it used to be, where it's just like your neighborhood was your fucking everything, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, that was your community, and, like, you were, like, invested in this fucking guy's grocer that was, like, on the corner and shit, you know, and, like, you knew him and his fucking kids or whatever, you know, and, like, I don't, like, so I think people are, like, desperate for, like, genuine community, because so much of it is just, like, the super ego of, like, the internet, and just, like, everybody sort of, like, being this sort of, like, looming constant job interview kind of attitude, where, like, everyone is putting their best face, and, like, everyone needs to seem like they're flexing and, like, get, like, making gains and shit, and it's just like everyone's like a fucking fuck up that's all messed up, that, like, is just trying to get through each day, you know?
Yeah, I get a lot of flack for, I love creating, and do you ever have a moment where you're like, is this even any good?
Yeah, it's usually like 3/4 of the way through something.
Really? Yeah.
It's like part of, like, being a video editor, where, like, I just go, like, this is never gonna fucking work. It's failed. Like, even at like my job, like, I edit marketing videos for, like, to actually make a living. And, like, yeah, it's even like that with that, where, like, if it's a complicated ed that I kind of can't get my head around for, like, a day, I'm just like, oh God, I'm just gonna, like, oh God, I'm just the worst. I'm the worst editor. I'm never gonna be able to get through this. And then something clicks. Like, I actually like that frustration moment, because it means it's almost over.
Yeah.
It's like this thing where, like, when I hit that point that I'm, like, banging my head against the wall, and I'm like, I'm walking away, I'll come back in an hour, and, like, then it clicks after that.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit different of a situation, because that kind of has to be good to somebody, or the people who are paying for it. But for, like, when it comes to my own art, I don't even really, and after it's out, and it's probably been out for a while, that's when I think to myself, is this even any good?
Yeah, no, that's a totally different thing. Yeah, but at the same time, I'm not really, I always have, like, the next project set up, and so I'm not really looking backwards that much at stuff. Like, I don't go back and look at the stuff I've made, like, on a fairly regular basis, unless I'm trying to show someone for some specific reason. So it's not, like, a thing I think about a lot, because, like, I mean, I always change. Like, I feel like the last time I watched Draw Hard, like, I was just like, oh, this could be, like, half this length. Like, I figured, like I'm just a better editor now. Like, I could just make this better. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that, like, I was in a different place. Like, I kind of look at art sort of like, I hate blackout tattoos. I'm sure it'll be, like, a controversial take to somebody, but, like, I think it's just, like, a negation of self. Like, I understand getting blast overs and, like, just being like, this is, like, a shitty like misogynistic tattoo or some shit. Like I want to cover it up. Like I get that, but just because you're going to deal with like flack in your everyday life. But there's something about like blackout tattoos that are like, you cannot get rid of whoever you were. Like I don't believe that conceptually. And so like, I just think that like part of life is just like understanding your half-formed self wherever it was, and like trying to just like understand that you're not the same person you were, and that's fine, and that there's nothing to be ashamed about.
Yeah, because I constantly get into the argument of like, because I've been really wanting to film a special for like the last like 2 years now, and people are like, oh, you know, you haven't been doing this that long, and you like the jokes aren't really formed or done yet. And I agree with them. They're not wrong with those statements, but like I don't need them to be.
Yeah.
I don't need them to be perfect. I just want to do it and get it done and like put it out there. And if I don't like it 2 years down the road, I got my money's worth out of it.
Yeah. I think everyone's in that like Carlin mindset of like, it's just like this sort of like on the record, and like all of these things are perfectly formed that you like tweezer food kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you need to go back to those fucking early Carlins. Like they're not great. Like there's plenty of them that like do not hold up. Like, and that's not to shit on him, but it's just like he put out like what, like 30 specials or something. Like
a lot. Yeah.
One of them's gonna not hit as hard. Like it's just the way that like life works. But again, that's kind of that thing that I was saying earlier, where it's just like, I think always just pull the trigger, even if it's shitty. Like people will forget. It's not like it's not like I literally have to like no one searches for anything, so like no one's gonna fucking find out something you did 5 years ago. Like it's so hard to get people to go to like page 2 of Google. Like no one's gonna fucking find anything you perceive as like an indictment of your worth as a person,
unless you've said something racist on a podcast. Other than that,
but again, you kind of need a certain level of success or clout at that point to justify even doing a look back, because it's just like, who gives a fuck if Dave is racist? Like, he's just playing at this corner bar.
That's so funny.
But yeah, I mean, my attitude towards that would be like, just fucking do it. I mean, like, even if you look at someone like I'm really not up to date on. I used to be way more into comedy, and like I just like haven't had time with life and stuff. But like recently, I've gotten like very into like Stavros. Like I think he's just like very particular, and he's doing something really interesting. And
I love him.
You look at his like crowd work special, and it's just a sloppy little special that was thrown together like with like a cell phone camera that he set up in the back of all these venues that all have shitty sound, and it's great.
Yeah,
like it's a great special because it's just him like vibing with the audience and like knowing exactly how to hook into some dudes.
I don't need it to be perfect. I don't need it to be. It just needs to be a snapshot in time, and that's all it is. Mm-hmm. That's all I need it to be. If I revamp those jokes later on and do them differently, or I want to do them differently on another special, I can always delete the thing I just did.
Oh, for sure.
I can get rid of it. Like it doesn't. It just because it's out doesn't mean it's permanent, and just because it's like you put it on the internet doesn't mean it can't go away either.
Yeah,
like I'm not that popular now where I can't bury that shit. Mm-hmm. So it's really like I don't need it. I think you're more better off having a lot of content than having nothing at all.
Oh, for sure.
Because if you have no content and you don't put any content down, you aren't really the thing you're saying you are. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like credit almost, where it's just like I've known a bunch of people that have been like afraid to get a credit card and stuff like that because they're afraid of going into debt. And they don't pay more for their purchases, and I understand all those fears, but it's like if no credit means is worse than having like credit debt ultimately, because it shows that you cannot pay bills. You have no on the record thing of like you paid your bill for 18 months straight. So like it doesn't matter if you have to pay a little bit extra for these groceries you overbought on this credit card. You know. Well,
that's also how you connect wealth in the middle class. It's not how much money they have. It's how much money they can receive and borrow is how we measure like the worth of somebody as far as money is concerned, which is so it's counterintuitive. You don't actually have anything at that point. Like, or even, I don't know, I am always skeptical of like the very, very rich or like, I guess maybe not just the 1%ers, but like maybe just a tier below that. And like, I wonder how much money they really do have. Like, do they really have that much money, or they're able to, or they have access to more money than I do?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is like leveraging and parking it in like assets and stuff. Like, you know, it's like you're cash poor, but you have this big mansion. So everyone's like, oh, it's the perceived value. And because you have this perceived value, then like suddenly everyone's just going to give you everything for free. Like that's the irony. I forget what comedian had that, but there's that joke about like, oh, you have no money. Yeah, like, so you don't get any, if anything, we're going to charge you money. But, oh, this guy's so rich, we're going to give him a bonus amount of money.
Right.
It's just like the amount of like when you look at like celebrity gift bags at award shows where they're just like when iPads first came out, they were giving them like a half dozen iPads in like every bag or whatever. And it's just like, they're not the ones that need this.
Right.
Give this to some other guy.
Well, it's then the reason why they do those things because it's good. They promoting because if you see this celebrity using their iPad,
I mean, I get it.
I get why they do it, but
it just feels crazy to me.
And they're probably going to buy it anyways to make a good product that a celebrity would want.
Yeah.
And just do that.
It's just like those new, like, is Apple the one putting out those new, like, VR glasses, that, like, augmented reality thing where, like, they're like goggles you wear. But
yes.
you can still swipe like you're in Minority Report.
Yes, it's that is good. That is Apple.
Yeah, like no one's gonna buy those. Like the average person's not gonna buy them for like two reasons. Like they're bulky and they look ridiculous. Like you look stupid, and they're like $4,000. So like no one's gonna be able to do a down payment like on a car, you know, for a fun little parlor trick that you can like check your Twitter on.
Yeah, it's surprising what people like will create that they think is purchasable, because I was watching this thing online about how somebody had created like the comfort sleep for a plane, and it's like this thing that goes on your tray and then you can lean on top of it. And yes, it's a brilliant idea, but it's bulky and it looks weird. Yeah. So no one's ever going to buy it for $500.
Yeah. Well, and I think that a lot of these people that are in like the tech industry and people that are manufacturing products like that, like don't understand that there's no middle class.
Yeah.
Like it's not the 90s anymore. Like we're not going to buy the fucking like Ron Popeil items, you know what I mean? That we don't fucking need. It's the whole like Marie Kondo, like simplify your life thing. I think part of that is like, it's not a psyop, but I do think that there's sort of this weird sort of unconscious culture of prepping people for like, you're not going to have shit. Like everything is subscription based. You don't own anything. You shouldn't have any clutter in your apartment because you're only ever going to be in this apartment. You're never going to be in a house. So you're never going to have room for clutter. So like, don't buy anything. Like, and so like, I don't know why these tech manufacturers think that like people are in the mindset of like, oh, I can just willy nilly buy this shit for like a stupid amount of money on a lark, you know?
Yeah, that's why they're building in most major cities just apartments. That's all they've been building. They haven't. When was the last time you said like a home development?
Oh yeah, no, I mean they don't want to do that after that housing crisis.
But it took
them like 10 years to get all those houses off the books.
Right now, they're just creating much smaller versions of that in apartment complexes that have like a restaurant in it or like an event space or whatever.
That costs like 3 mortgages a month to rent.
100%. Yeah, it's crazy. And they get away with it.
Buying houses. It's just like, I don't know. I don't see how I could feasibly amass, $40,000 to buy a house.
Yeah, it's just never going to happen. So we're all fucked. We're all doomed, and we're all going to hell, and
just have fun with it.
And we won't even be able to afford that. That's the sad part. We're going to come to a point where we're like, they're going to have to come up with some sort of like government program to bury people because we can't afford to even die. That being said,
just right into the ocean.
And we didn't really dive too much into the childhood, which was normally where we go on this podcast.
Yeah,
but like, no, that's okay. There's no wrong conversation on a podcast. It's just the one that's being documented. Where can people go to find the new book, documentary, and you yourself?
Okay, so you can go stream my new documentary about Justin Pearson, San Diego, and like their noise scene out there, where bands like Blood Brothers and The Locust and all that awesome boom of just like insanity in the early 2000s came out. You can go stream that on turnstylefilms.com. For my book stuff, including my new book, Ferals, just go to withnxbooks.com. And like it's available there along with all the other releases that I put out. And then to follow me at Jon Nix Film or at Jon Nix Photo on Instagram and Twitter and everything else.
Hell yeah. Per usual, you can find me at Jeremy _ Demery. It looked like this thing stopped recording. I hope it's still recording. You can find me at Jeremy _ Demery, and go to secretsociety.com to figure out where we're at next, and go to vixenvariety.com to figure out what shows we have coming up next for that. And hopefully this is still being documented. So, all right. Thank you so much for doing this. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thank you for having me on.
Jon Nix, everybody.